Hello, everyone. Today I am joined by Delegate Joe Vogel.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
No, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate talking to you. You are, of course, for people who are watching, the second delegate I've had the honor to speak to. And yeah, thank you so much for making the time for this.
Of course. Looking forward to it.
So for people who aren't aware of you already, do you mind introducing yourself a little bit and telling people about who you are?
Yeah, I'm Joe Vogel. I am a state delegate. I represent Gaithersburg, where we are right now, and the city of Rockville as well. Have been in the state legislature for, we're coming on my fourth year now, which is crazy. Time flies.
Oh my God, I know, right?
And and yeah, I've loved the work that I've been able to do. I serve on the Ways and Means Committee, where I get to work on education policy and policies impacting businesses across the state, and have championed a number of issues in my time in the legislature, from workers' rights to advocating for children in the foster care system, to ensuring that our small businesses have adequate supports, and that our government is operating in a way that is transparent and effective. So, I love the work that I get to do, and I love getting to have conversations like these.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So we'll of course talk about all of your experience working in the General Assembly. It's very interesting. I want to start the conversation by talking about how you got there.
Yeah.
So something that's very important, or something that came up when I was preparing for this, is that you were not born in the U.S. You were born in Uruguay, right?
Yeah.
So talk about your journey coming over to the States. What did your early life look like?
Yeah, no, my family immigrated to the United States when I was 3 years old. We came from Uruguay, this small country in South America, and we actually moved to Rockville when we first came here. So the house my parents live in now is less than a mile away from the first house that we moved into when we came to the United States. And actually pretty amazing, when I voted for myself for the legislature, it was just a couple blocks away from that first house.
That is so cool.
We lived in. Yeah, it was amazing. And this community welcomed me in 25 years ago, I think 25 years ago this year, that my family has lived in the United States. And it's pretty awesome to now get to represent that very community that was so welcoming to me and my family when we first came to this country. And there have been a number of anecdotes over my time in public service where people who I now represent as constituents can remember when my family first came to this country. So whether it's a classmate and her parents who are now constituents of mine, who remember that, what it was like for this young little kid from a different country coming into school for the first day. They have clearer memories of it than I do, right? Or teachers of mine who, I just had a teacher of mine come to my Reelection campaign launch rally, a teacher of mine from, I want to say, kindergarten.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, all of these people who I came across really early in my time, as an American, right, are now, I have the privilege of getting to represent them and serve them and give back to them after all they did for me. And the last thing I'll say there is that journey as an immigrant means so much to me, right? And I think it gives me a unique perspective as I'm engaging with a number of my constituents, both immigrants and just people who have lived here maybe for generations, right? But I feel like I have this really unique and special appreciation, not just for the United States, but also for this community and for the state of Maryland, and this deep conviction to advocate for immigrants like myself who, right now, I think that's more important than ever.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. I love that aspect of your background. There's something to be said about, I would be interested in looking at statistics on this, because I know many people who have done work in the Maryland General Assembly, myself included, have made Maryland a home, but weren't necessarily born there, right? Like I came from the Midwest, I came from Ohio, and I know so many people who share that experience. So it's really great to be able to hear about how you share that and have still managed to really develop a strong bond with your community. Can you talk a little bit about that? How have you been involved in Rockville and in Gaithersburg? Like, how have you been involved in this community throughout your career?
Yeah, so, I think that my childhood was so formative in how I view this community.
Yeah.
And when I grew up in this small townhouse in Rockville. I still drive past it every once in a while and I stop there and I just kind of look around because I mean, as a kid, right? So many of your formative memories happen in your early childhood,
Sure.
and for me, I feel like it was not only me growing up as a kid, but it was also me growing up in this entirely new culture and environment where I was getting these first impressions, not only of getting these first impressions of what it meant to be an American and what it meant to live in this state,
Yeah.
right? I was living it as my parents were living it, right? Getting acclimated to this entirely new society and culture. And what I love about where I was able to grow up is you had this house surrounded by all these other townhouses, right? And every house was a family from some other part of the world with some different background. I mean, there were no two
Okay.
houses where the families living inside were the same.
The real American
Right.
melting pot.
It really was, and I think about I had neighbors from literally all over the world, and we would all come out at after school or in the summer. It would be all day, and until it was dark outside when our parents would come out looking for us. It was, I call it this United Nations of children, where kids from all over the world of all different backgrounds would come together and not just play but form community, and that was my first impression of what it meant to be an American and what it meant to be a Marylander. So
right.
as I grew up, right, those were the values that I grew up with, and I started getting involved in community service and local politics when I was in high school. As I started to care deeply about, I was a very curious young person, and as I started to care more about these issues, I started to get involved in local politics, working on campaigns specifically for certain issues. Right.
Talk a little bit about that, because
Yeah.
especially for people who are watching, I try to, I have a lot of people who watch who are younger people
Yeah.
who are looking to get more involved
Yeah.
and who are looking to make more of a difference. So, yeah, let's start at like high school and then look at college.
Yeah.
And like, what were the things that you got involved in that you think made the biggest impact and had the biggest had the biggest influences on you
Yeah.
as you proceeded in your career?
Yeah, so I went to school at a time when I really think I was that first wave of students who were dealing with the way that we know gun violence exists today in our schools,
Okay.
and the threat of gun violence and the threat of school shootings.
Okay.
And I remember at a pretty early age when we started having the drills, right? And it is something that for my parents, it was I mean, just the idea of us doing that was unimaginable, right? I mean, what world were we living in as kids? That I remember the first memory that I have of a school shooting drill was we were in a PE class. I was in elementary school. I was probably like in 3rd grade.
Oh my God.
And they shoved us all into the storage room of this gym and shut the door and turn off the lights. And as a 3rd grader, like, I wasn't afraid of school shootings. I was afraid of the damn dark, right? And we're sitting there in the dark with my classmates, having to stay in absolute silence, right? And that just became one of so many episodes of those drills, right? And luckily, I was never someone that dealt with a school shooting like that. That never happened at my school, thankfully. But we would see them on the news, and then at our school we would practice. And I remember I had this chemistry teacher of mine. We come into class one day, and she says, "All right, I stayed late yesterday, and I've assigned each of you a specific hiding spot where if there is a school shooter, each of you is going to the spot based on the angles of the windows and the door." And for an educator in the United States of America to have to stay after school to determine the angles of the windows and the doors to assess where her students were going to be safest.
Crazy.
I mean, what are we doing, right? So gun violence was one of those issues, and the other was the climate crisis. And I started learning about climate change in school through movies. I watched. I think it was a moment of learning for so many people in this country, but the Al Gore movie, right? That
Oh,
first
yeah.
Al Gore movie where I remember watching it with my parents and that being really some of my first exposure to the threat of the climate crisis. And then out of curiosity, learning more and more and more. And as a young person in middle school, just starting to care and be so concerned about climate change. And we're talking about, you know, um, 15 years ago, right? And so I sought out a candidate at the time, my state senator,
Okay.
who I knew was focused on two issues. One was climate change, the other was gun violence.
Is this Senator Kagan?
Senator Kagan. So
Ah.
I went to work for her when she was first running for the state senate, and it wasn't because I at the time I wanted to be a doctor, I'm not really good around blood, and I'm kind of a hypochondriac.
I
so
get it. All right.
I don't think
Same
that would have
reason.
really worked out for me, but the idea of being in an environment where I could really help people just
Yeah.
always spoke to me since I was a young person, and so I came across this campaign and I said, hey, I want to get involved and I want to help. Go
Talk
ahead.
about that. So what did that look like getting involved? Because I think a lot of people hear like, oh, it's good to get involved in campaigns. And like, what did that practically look like for you, like getting involved with her campaign and getting like more involved in Maryland politics?
I mean, I literally just showed up.
Really?
And what I love about that is that it's not something that to me it is. For me, it was. I mean, it's challenging, right? Like
Sure.
you have to figure out. I was a young person, right? Work up the courage to say, hey, I want to go do this. I want to.
Yeah.
I had never worked in this space before. I had never volunteered in a campaign before, right? To show up that first time, but I'll say, since I've been in office and running for office, I've had so many young people who've done the same thing, right?
Cool.
Who've come into our campaigns, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a bit, but. The same way that every time that a new young person comes into this, volunteers for me, knocks on doors for one of my campaigns, I associate it with that first day that I walked into. I literally just walked into the campaign office and I said, I want to help.
That's so
right?
cool.
And that, for me, not only allowed me to get involved and help support someone who was going to work on those two issues that I cared so deeply about, but it really did launch me on this long career in public service.
Yeah, no, I really like that. That resonates with other things, other experiences I've heard as well, or even just mine. When I got involved with Wes Moore's campaign,
Yeah.
that was because I just connected with him over at the Baltimore Pride Parade when he was
Yep.
campaigning. It's just sometimes it can be as simple as
Yeah.
going up and introducing yourself. And I know that a lot of people are going to hear that, especially in this day and age, and be like, but Riley, are you really going to say that I just need to walk in and be like, I want to help? But no, this is one of those places. And I think it's probably more true at the state and local level that that's probably going to be true. But yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Well, practically speaking, and then a bit bigger picture. Practically speaking, I mean that is campaigns and elected officials and candidates. They want you to get engaged. They want you to be involved, right? We spend so much time and effort going out and trying to find people to get involved in our movements and our campaigns. And if you seek it out and you say, hey, actually, I want to be part of this. And I've had one of the most moving examples of that was this high school student who was involved in my campaign when I first ran for the state legislature, who didn't wait for us to reach out, but he sent me a DM one day on Instagram and said he was a student at Magruder High School.
Okay.
And Magruder had just experienced a school shooting with a ghost gun. And he sends me a message and he says, you're the only candidate I see right now who's responding to this, who's talking about the urgent need to address gun violence in our state. That's not, there's a lot of my colleagues who have done just remarkable work in addressing gun violence and banning ghost guns. But at the time, right, he wanted to work for a campaign and a candidate who was going to make this a priority. Okay. So he reached out and he said, how can I help? And he got involved. He was knocking on doors. He went all over with our campaign and was so critical to us reaching voters and winning that race. The Washington Post did an article when I was running, front of the Metro section. They covered our campaign, and the last quote is a quote from him.
That is
where
so cool.
he says that one day he hopes to run for office too, right? So it's, for me, it's, and there have been a number of examples like that of people who've gotten involved in, who we've been the first touch point, not just with electoral politics, but really with engaging in democracy. And I think it has set them on a path of getting more engaged in politics and government. And I can see a significant number of them one day choosing to run for office.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Let's circle back. So you talked about you worked with, or you volunteered, worked with Senator Kagan's campaign. Now, I went through your history. What did you do after? Did you go and get your timeline? I know that you eventually got your master's in public policy from Harvard.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, you ran for your position with Delegate. So what was the chain of events afterwards?
So a lot happened in a short period of time.
Okay.
So, for me, right, after I worked for State Senator Kagan, she won. And then American politics got a little weird, right?
What year was this? Is this around 2016?
This is 2014 when
Okay.
Senator Kagan got elected. So things shit hit the fan. So for me, it was this moment of real confusion because I was not ignorant to what was going on in this country and what was going on around the world.
Sure.
But if you think about what I was talking about earlier and the values and atmosphere that I grew up around, which was one of inclusion and acceptance, and where diversity was welcomed and celebrated, and where people of all different viewpoints could come together, immigrants from all over the world. That's literally the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Sure.
Right. I'm not even talking about the city. Like the neighborhood, the blocks that I grew up in were a community where everyone came together from all different walks of life, of all different backgrounds, of all different ethnicities and races and national origins and language. All different languages were being spoken. And when we would all go play together outside, it would be this, everyone would come together and form this just incredible community. And then everyone would go home and live their own different lives.
Sure.
And we would celebrate each other's cultures and learn from each other. I mean, it was just amazing, right? And then what really upset me was not just the different policies that were being offered,
Sure.
right? By at the time when Donald Trump was a candidate, and the rise of his MAGA movement,
Sure.
but really how it presented a reality in this country that was so opposite to everything that I knew growing up about what this country was to me and to so many others. So I got involved. I went to work for Secretary Hillary Clinton when she was running for president, and traveled all over the country for her campaign. And I mean, I was at the I was on the campaign's advance team, and my assignment for Election Day, I was responsible for organizing and coordinating the motorcade that was taking Secretary Clinton, her family, her staff, her supporters, the logistics of how we were going to get that motorcade from her house to the hotel, from the hotel to the election night rally.
So quick pause, because this is interesting. So obviously it's very different from local politics. You can't exactly just walk into Hillary Clinton's campaign office and be like, hey, I want a job. So how'd you get involved in that?
I was really persistent, and probably another word for it would be annoying. So I reached out to as many people as I could, and I mean, I was finally able to get connected with the right person who advocated for me and helped me get a job. You know, my parents are not big political donors. I don't come from a big political family. It really was just being insistent and persistent about wanting to get a job on that campaign, because I recognized the urgency of the moment and I wanted to be part of it.
Yeah,
right?
of course. So just like what, reaching out to people on like Twitter DMs or Instagram or like by email or just like...
Yeah, at the time it was more so email.
Okay, gotcha.
But I went to like a couple of her rallies and
just like go up to people there and be like, hey, I want to volunteer for you.
I was like, I want whatever your job is, right? And it worked. And so election night, that was my job. And I feel like in a lot of ways I was in the epicenter of the world just crumbling down, right? Like I was, we were at the hotel. She was awaiting the results like 2 floors above me, and we were just, my job was like getting the logistics of the motorcade. I was 19 years old, so it was a big job for a 19-year-old. I don't know why they gave me that job, but that was my job for the night. And I'd been doing, I'd been working I'd been having smaller jobs like that all over the country on a lot of her trips, but this was a big one, right? So I didn't want to mess it up. So I wasn't even really processing as she was losing that election. I was just so focused on the logistics at hand, and so after she lost, like so many other Americans, right? I felt this need to stay involved and to get even more involved and to fight back against what was not just policies that were harmful and values that were different than mine, but a perception of America and a reality of America, right? A vision of America that was just so different from what I know this country to be. And I will say, in the years that have followed and the work that I've been able to do and the ways that I've been able to travel across the across my district, across the state of Maryland, and across the country, I believe even more strongly in that vision of America that I knew growing up versus this distorted vision of America that Trump and the MAGA movement keep pushing.
Is that what pushed you to go get your master's? Because timeline of events, that would have been pretty soon thereafter, right?
Yeah, well, I worked on a couple different campaigns after that. Worked for a few different, issue advocacy groups, and for me, the decision to go get my master's really came down, and the fact that I wanted to get it specifically in public policy came down to this something that I realized over time, which was, I'd spent so much time working in politics.
Sure.
And I knew a lot about politics.
Yeah.
But I wanted to learn more about how policy impacts people's lives and how making those, and I'd seen really the consequences of good policies versus bad policies, right? In the work that I'd done and the work that I'd done here in my community. And I wanted to go learn how not just to fight in politics and how to work in that space, but more importantly, how we can actually turn our values into policy advancements.
Yeah, I really like that. I had a similar motivation. I also got a master's in public policy.
Yeah.
And it's, I think that there's politics as its own kind of field. And a lot of people even do politics as sort of a hobby, which is typically what we see on social media. But I think that when we're talking about policy, right, it's kind of where we are actually starting to really consider in a professional and a methodical sense, like what are we advancing that we know to the best of our ability is going to meaningfully help the lives of the people that we're advocating for, right? And that's, it's some, there's some relation to politics. Like obviously you still have to be able to make those important connections. You have to be able to build coalitions. Like there's a lot of skills that carry over, but like it is important so that you can kind of center what is important to advocate for. So no, I really like that. Just to shift because I want to make sure that we're efficient with time. You pretty shortly thereafter, within I think about a year, then announced that you were running for delegate. So talk about your decision to run for delegate, the circumstances around there, and what kind of gave you the push to decide, all right, I want to run and represent District 17, Gaithersburg and Rockville.
I'm a man in a rush, I guess. So.
Nothing wrong with that. But I'm, talk about this because you're also, I believe that you are, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you are the youngest member of the Maryland General Assembly.
I was.
You what? You were?
It's a sore subject.
Oh, no.
No. But it's, so I think it was the same motivations that drove me to show up at that campaign office for the first time when I was 16 years old. And I think it was the same motivations that led me to get involved in political campaigns, the same motivations that led me to get involved in different community service volunteer capacities when I was a middle school or high schooler growing up in this community. I first was thinking about the idea of running for office in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I think COVID illustrated to all of us just how bad public policy can literally be deadly, right? And how devastating it can be for so many communities. And there were a number of, I mean, at every level of government, right, and especially federal.
Yeah.
But even local decisions that were being made that I saw policy decisions impacting the lives of real people in really devastating ways. And at the same time, around that time, one day I was reading this this article about learning loss, and it was pretty early on in the pandemic. And I was reading this article on learning loss, and I said, you know what, I have time. At the time, I was working for this nonprofit that was working on tech accountability and keeping social media companies accountable.
Okay.
But I still had some time to do some work on the side and volunteer on the side. I mean, we were all locked down for the most part, right? So I said, I want to start a nonprofit to help children of essential workers, specifically, recognizing that while a lot of us were staying home, there were individuals who were going to have to go out and work, right? Your doctors and your nurses and your grocery store workers and your transportation, your metro operators and your bus operators and so many others who didn't have the luxury of staying home and locking down, but their kids were still at home, and their kids were experiencing learning loss from virtual schooling, but didn't have the expectation was, okay, your parents were home to help you with your homework, your parents were home to help you stay on track, but not everyone had that luxury. So we started this nonprofit specifically focused on helping the children of those essential workers to be able to stay on track in school. So we rallied hundreds of volunteers across the country to provide free online virtual tutoring to the children of those essential workers, and we ran that for most of the pandemic, and
I mean, it's phenomenal work. I love that, because we're probably going to be seeing over the next couple of years as well, but immediately we're noticing that a lot of kids, especially early on, were very negatively very negatively affected by being, stuck at home and unable to not only learn as well as they probably would have if they were in person, but also like not able to develop a lot of the social skills that come with early, being in school. And mind you, like, I'm not saying that it was necessarily the wrong decision to keep them home because, we want to make sure that we're protecting the health of everybody. But that is something that I'm glad to see that you were able to address with your nonprofit.
But to answer your question, right? I saw policies that were broken, and I saw systems that were failing.
Sure.
And I found in my community, right, and the people that I knew, an opportunity to rally people and say, hey, let's build something to help. And at the same time, I was still reflecting on a lot of the issues that had encouraged me to get involved in politics in the first place, right? This concern that a lot of the challenges that we were dealing with, we're still dealing with, the decisions that are being made right now are going to have consequences for my generation as a young person, right? We're going, you think about the climate crisis, I always say by 2050, that's when experts say we're going to face the most catastrophic consequences of the climate crisis. By 2050, I'm still going to be younger than the average state legislator in Annapolis, right, in the Maryland General Assembly. You think about gun violence and the unique experience that my generation has had with school shootings and with all these lockdowns and just all these other issues that I considered it then in 2022 when I ran for office, and I still consider that we're in this moment where we are in a moment of this is a once in a generation moment.
Sure.
Right, where the challenges that we face are going to have profound generational consequences. And I believe then, the same way that I believe now, that we needed this new generation of leadership to rise up and meet that moment. So all of those things combined, the crisis that we were in, the ability that I saw in myself and those around me to meet this moment in whatever way we could, whether it was starting a nonprofit or eventually running for office, and the what I felt like was this urgent need for a new generation of leadership to rise up and meet this moment, I ultimately decided to run for the state legislature.
All right, let's get into brass tacks then.
All right.
So you're coming in, again, like you're, like you just said, compared to everyone else in the General Assembly, like a much younger person running for office. I mean, I don't mind this because we're right around, I'm 29, so we're right around the same, so I love to see it. How did you like brass tacks actually make it happen? So like, who did you reach out to early? How are you able to build up a campaign from the, from the ground up? Like, how did you make that happen?
Yeah. So a huge shout out here goes to my state senator, right? So if you think about
Senator Kagan?
if you think about that moment in 2013, 2014, when I first walked up to her campaign office and said, "Hey, I want to help."
Yeah.
Right. Fast forward 10 years, and she was there when I decided to run for the state house, and she was my first supporter and a huge champion in my run, and encouraged me to run. And the reason that I give her just tremendous credit is because I think so often in our politics today we don't see that. We don't see someone who has been in office, who has served in office, look to lift up a new generation of leadership. In fact, I think what we see now in our politics is the opposite of that. It's elected officials who've been in office for decades and decades and decades who would actually prefer that younger generations stay out of office, right? And who don't want to pass the torch. But here you had someone who was actively seeking an opportunity to bring up a new generation of leadership and bring someone into the state legislature who represented a younger generation. So I started running, and it was pretty early, early on in the campaign, and just hit every door I could, met with every single person I could, made every phone call that I could. And it was hard, right? Like I said earlier, I don't come from a political family. I don't have a big political last name. My parents, were not going to fund my campaign, right? It was not, I think so often in our politics, right? Even when you see younger candidates, they often know someone or have been around in some way for some time.
But this is someone who you had volunteered for previously and who's able to now, at this point, be kind of a mentor to you.
Yes, but it wasn't your standard, like you have the same last name as the incumbent, or have generation after generation of family and public life. My story was not that, right? So it really was introducing myself to the first time to people all over this district and earning their support one by one by one by one. And I found that the best way to do it was to show up and have those conversations, get to know people, and then show up again and again and again and again. And eventually, our win was pretty amazing in that, what we built was to me so exciting, right? The way that young people, and really it was a multi-generational campaign, but young people were really the energy behind it, and were there every day knocking on doors and making those calls. And when we won, I got about as many votes as the two incumbents, right? So we had just a really exciting victory, and then I've loved the work that I've been able to do ever since, and I just feel so grateful to the people who took a chance, the constituents here in Gaithersburg and Rockville who took a chance on a 24, 25-year-old candidate for the state legislature.
Let's talk about the work that you've done since then.
Yeah.
So this has been your first session.
Yes.
So talk about your experience with it, some of the things that you wish you would have known going in, some of the big lessons you've taken away, and some of the big efforts that you've been able to work on since you've started.
Yeah. So first term, we're going to my fourth legislative session. So when I first got in, I felt this pressure in knowing that, they just elected a 25-year-old to the state legislature. I got sworn in, I think I was 25, to the state, I can't even remember anymore, it's been 3 years.
You're all good.
To the state legislature. And I felt like the expectation was going to be that I wasn't going to meet the moment, right? That I wasn't going to be able to do a good job, because you send an untested 25-year-old to the state legislature, you don't know what you're going to get. And I felt like for me, it wasn't just about me as an individual legislator, but I really did represent this new generation of young people who I thought, if I mess this up, we're going to have a problem.
Sure.
Right? And so this, I sat down with someone who was pretty seasoned, had been in Annapolis for quite some time. And when I first sat down with him, he said, he was kind of a power player of sorts. He said, not elected, but he said, for the first few years, just sit in the back, stay quiet, don't make much noise, and eventually you can start working on things here and there, right? But for the time being, don't do anything. Just stay quiet. And that was not my approach, right?
Good.
And I got in there and I introduced, as a 25-year-old first-time legislator who hadn't spent much time in Annapolis, I introduced, 10 bills, which was more than any of my first-time colleagues, right? And when I did that, I mean, they were all substantive bills, right? And
not just like relicensing for alcohol or something.
no, I mean,
whatever.
we were taking on some pretty significant issues. And I think in the end, we managed to, I mean, one of them, which I was so proud of, started as a campaign issue. I was knocking on doors, and I had over the course of the campaign, I had been hearing about the crisis that was mental health in our schools, especially coming out of COVID. And I was knocking on a door, and I had a teacher, or a school psychologist, an educator, who couldn't open the door because she was, keeping her dogs inside. But she starts talking to me from the window of her house, and she tells me how she would love to be able to be to continue being a school psychologist, but she couldn't afford her student debt. So I said at the door, I'm going to do something about that. One of the first bills that I introduced was a bill to expand a loan forgiveness program in our state to include school psychologists, school social workers, and school counselors.
Okay.
And in my first legislative session, it took on a new form and it got amended into a new bill, but that policy that I introduced got passed into law.
Oh, in your first session.
In my first session.
That
right?
is, and for everyone, for large substantive things, you sometimes introduce things and you'll introduce it, it'll get stricken down, you reintroduce it, it takes that's impressive.
Yeah, but same thing with, we introduced legislation to create a commission on hate crimes. We got that passed. We introduced legislation to address the fact that in our hospitals, when there were incidents of suspected drug overdoses, hospitals weren't testing for fentanyl. Right, they were testing for all the other drugs, but they weren't testing for the leading cause of overdoses, which is the drug fentanyl in our state. Right, so we changed the law to require hospitals to test for fentanyl alongside the federal 5 drugs. So we came in and we hit the ground running, right?
Yeah.
And I was so proud of the work that we'd been able to do. And then I came back for my second session, and we tackled the issue of the fact that children in the foster care system were getting trash bags for their belongings in the state of Maryland. As you're going from home to home, rather than you getting proper luggage, you're given a trash bag to put your clothes in. Right? The fact that these kids who are going through so much pain and just a turbulent time in their lives, and rather than saying, here's a dignified piece of luggage for you to put your stuff in, we're giving them a trash bag, right? So we passed a bill to end that practice in the state of Maryland and require that every child in the foster care system have proper luggage as they're going from home to home. And I mean, we've done the last bill that I'll touch on very quickly because I'm so proud of it. A lot of these bills, it's not like, it's not because I come up with the idea at some point in the middle of the night, right? It's because people come to me and they bring these ideas. And that's how I think representative government is supposed to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're in active conversation with people. The trash bag bill, the luggage for children in the foster care system, that bill started because I showed up at a nonprofit and spoke to the CEO of that nonprofit and learned about this issue. And I said, I'm going to do something about this. We're going to pass that bill. The fentanyl bill started with a conversation I had with a family in Baltimore who had experienced loss because of a fentanyl overdose, and they learned about this issue. They'd made this the cause that they wanted to work on, and we got that bill passed. The school psychologist loan forgiveness bill that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I told that story. And one of the others was this constituent of mine who brought to my attention the issue of captive audience meetings. And one of the go-to practices for union busters, tactics of union busters, not just in Maryland, but across the country. I think 13 states by now have banned these practices. The Biden admin had declared those meetings to be illegal, to be an illegal practice of trying to bust unions. But obviously this new administration couldn't care less. So I've introduced 2 years in a row now legislation to end those meetings, to prohibit those meetings. And this last year, the House of Delegates passed that bill, which I was just so proud of, and we're going to bring it back, and I'm hoping the Senate passes it too, and then we get it to the governor's desk. But I think by now I've been able to pass, I think, close to, if not a dozen bills in my time as a delegate.
That's phenomenal. So a big part of why I'm doing this is
Yeah.
because I've been doing interviews with legislators such as yourself, and
Yeah.
that's been absolutely wonderful. I've also been using my connections with political and social media influencers to have interviews with them.
Yeah.
And I think that as we move forward in time, we're going to see more and more overlap between social media and actual real politics. So I guess I'm curious from your perspective, because I ask all the influencers how they think that they could help in legislators and how they think they could actually have meaningful effects on policy. From your perspective, how do you think that influencers, if they wanted to help and assist with your causes, how do you think are the best ways that they could do that?
So I think here is, I'm not going to answer your question directly.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
I have a concern with the way that we talk about our politics today, right? I think there is a lot that is broken. Don't get me wrong. And we're doing what we can to fix it.
Okay.
And I think the chaos that you see at the federal government level is what most people are introduced to when they think about politics. But the truth is that when you look at the work that we've been able to do here in the state,
Sure.
some of the bills that I just mentioned and the ways that we've been able to make significant advancements, pass policies that improve the conditions of people's lives in a number of different ways. Right? You look at Maryland, the state legislature. In my time there, we've passed legislation several times to lower the cost of health care for Maryland families. We've passed legislation to lower the cost of child care for Maryland families. We've passed legislation to lower the cost of energy bills for Maryland families. We've passed legislation to address gun violence. We've passed legislation to address the climate crisis. And I sit around my colleagues each and every day, and I see the passion that they have for making a difference and improving people's lives and helping people, right? And so often we hear of government and people say, well, those politicians don't care about us.
Sure.
And I'm doing everything in my power to make the reforms necessary, right, here in Maryland, to make it unquestionably clear that if you are in public office, and what that looks like is we're working to ban corporations from contributing to politicians. We're working to end this practice of committee dinners, which are, I think, also a corrupting practice, right? But we're taking care of all of that.
Okay.
But at the foundation, right? When you look at most of my colleagues, they just want people's lives to be better, and they're just trying to help people.
Yeah.
Right? And they're passing bills that are doing just that. So I worry when we look at government and the reaction that we see so much online is government's bad, government's bad, government's bad, politics is bad, politics is bad. That is the immediate reaction that people have to what government's all about. That's not just a concern. That's more than anything, I think, a concern to our democracy. So we have to tackle it on both ends. Elected officials need to do a better job at proving that government can work for people, and that elected officials are accountable to people. But also on the other end, right, we need people to communicate the moments and the examples of when government actually is delivering for people and actually making people's lives better.
Yeah, no, I really like that, especially making sure that you were able to highlight the wins that we're able to get for the people of Maryland, for the people of the United States of America.
Yes.
No, I do really appreciate that. And actually, on that note, because we have people who are watching at home, you are running for re-election.
Yeah.
So talk about that and how people can get involved with your campaign.
Yeah, look, I think the best way to do it is to go to my social media, right? Follow me on at Joe Vogel on Instagram or on any other TikTok, any other social media platform. And I'm the person at the other end of that account.
So you're the one who runs it personally?
Yeah, I mean, I get some help sometimes, but that for me, that is a way to directly communicate with my constituents and with people who share my values and who want to support the work that we're doing. And there have been a number of examples where people reach out saying, I need help with this, or I had a constituent the other day reach out asking for resources from the state level, from the state government as we were dealing with the government shutdown. I have had people reach out to me with ideas for legislation, right? And I've had people just reach out and say, hey, I support this, keep going, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the best way to be in touch with me. So Joe Vogel on Instagram, give me a follow.
That's
I
phenomenal.
might follow back.
All right, no, I absolutely love that. I love also, this will be the last thing I'll say, at the state level is because you do see a lot of legislators who actually are meaningfully using their social media, whereas like, you know, at the federal level, it's probably like, for the most part, run by staffers, but at the state level, like I remember seeing like Senator Kagan herself, she would be like tweeting while on the floor and I'd be like, oh my God, and it's, I don't know, there's something, because you want social media to be personable, you want to be a way to be able to connect with people, and you know, I like that that still exists at the state level, so.
Absolutely.
Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Yeah, and I will of course recommend, I'll put Joe's socials on here, and I assume that you have a campaign website where people can go to and donate to you and contribute, and however they want to do. So that will be here, but thank you so much for joining me.
You're the best. Thank you.
Yeah.